Hi, I'm Valerie Abrahamian with Advocates for Angels, and I'm continuing my Facebook Live series on the IEP season. So tonight I thought I would choose the subject, the IEE, the Independent Educational Evaluation. All week long, I've been going to IEP meetings and we've been reviewing independent educational evaluations. So I thought this is going to be a good topic to review with parents because really important thing that a parent can ask for in the development of your child's special education program. And most parents don't even know what an IEE is or how to ask for it. So an IEE is an independent educational evaluation that is funded by the school district. So when you ask for that assessment, it doesn't come out of your pocket, it's at the school district's expense. And that independent educational evaluation is conducted by an outside service provider specialist in whatever area that you are disagreeing with the district's assessment. So if it's a psychological assessment and you disagree with that, you'll get an IEE in the area of psychoeducational testing. Same with speech and language, occupational therapy, behavior, whatever it may be, you're going to ask for a specific service provider that is not an employee of the school district, is not biased with school district agendas, and is going to give you a much more comprehensive and complete and accurate assessment because they don't work for the school district. So without an IEE, you're really not going to be able to receive the supports and services or the goals or the accommodations that your child needs because the school district assessments, because they are school district staff, they are not going to really delve deep and do comprehensive assessments. IEE service providers, they're typically doctors in their area, in their field of expertise. Many times, let's take a psychologist, for example. So a psych district service provider typically has a master's degree. So they're not doctors of psychology or doctors of neurology, where all of the IEE service providers that you're going to get are doctors of either psychology or neurology and have been doing this for many, many years. So they have much more experience, much more expertise, and they understand the IEP process. So going back to looking at the example of a psychologist at a school site. So I'm not saying that they're not some of them aren't doctors have their doctorate degree, but typically, even if they do have their doctorate degree, they get their degree, and then they go and they become psychs at the school site, but they don't know about the IEP process still. They know about psychology or how to test in the area of psychoeducational assessment, but they don't necessarily know the IEP process, okay? So they don't know how to write goals. They don't know how to make recommendations for accommodations. They don't know how to make recommendations for, oh, I see a deficit in vision in this child. I see a deficit in auditory processing, or I see deficits in other areas of processing and recommend further assessment. You'll never get that from a school district assessment. So the only way you're going to get that is if you get an IEE. Okay? So let's see what, I wanted to tell you, I have a friend that she's actually one of my IEE service providers as a psychologist, and she used to be a special education director at a school district. And she actually says, Valerie, you're absolutely right. She said, when I used to head up the psychology department in my district, those psychologists had no idea how to write goals. And she said, I used to have to provide training and in-services to my psychologists to say, look, you guys, when you write a psychoeducational assessment, you don't just write the test scores down and then hand it to the IEP team and say, okay, here's where they're at with all the test scores, and then there's no recommendations from that. There has to be, the whole purpose of having an assessment is to say, okay, what do we do now? How do we take these test scores and then translate that into the IEP to help the child. And so that the result of that assessment should be goals that are written in the areas of deficit, and then of course goals drive services, right? So then what services is appropriate in those areas of need. So that's what you should be looking for when you get an assessment. And like I said, typically, you're not going to find that with a district assessment, and at that point, you're going to say, I disagree with the district assessment, and I'm requesting an IEE. Now, there might be other things in the district assessment that you don't agree with. Maybe it doesn't even sound like your child. When you read it, you're like, that doesn't sound like my kid. So that's another reason to disagree with it. Or there might be other areas in the assessment findings that you don't agree with. But typically, the school district assessments don't follow mandated steps that must be taken. There's a certain format in which they are mandated to follow when they do an assessment, and most of the time, because they're overwhelmed, they have too many assessments to do, they want to just get it done, and they do it as quickly and easily as possible, and most of the time it does not follow that mandated requirements that the IDEA and state law requires. So you can pretty much be safe knowing that if you disagree with your district assessment, you're going to be able to obtain an IEE. Now, the only time that this might happen is because they have to give you the IEE. The only time they don't have to give you the IEE at the district expense is when the district says, no, we don't believe we should have to spend $5,000 to provide an IEE to this parent, because we feel that our district assessment is so great and so perfect and so complete and accurate that there's no reason why we should have to fund an outside assessment. And at that point, though, if they say no to a parent, they are required by law to file for hearing, to go before a judge and tell the judge, we said no to this parent, we're not going to provide an IEE at our expense because we feel that our assessment is so awesome that we shouldn't have to do that. And at that point, the judge would look it over and make his determination on whether he felt that they should provide an IEE. And I can say, 99% of the time, the district does not do that good of an assessment, and you're going to get your IEE. Now, it's also a way that the districts use to scare parents, because parents get scared when they say, oh my gosh, they filed a hearing on me. What do? I don't want to go to hearing. I'm going to have to hire a lawyer. I'm going to have to do this or that. No, you don't really have to do that, because they're banking on that. They're banking on you saying, oh, I don't want to do that. Just kidding. I don't want an IEE. I take it back. I retract my request. That's what they want you to do. And that's what they're banking on. So don't do it. What you should do is at that point you can go and you can ask, find your IEE provider that you choose. Then you fund the IEE at your expense, and then you take that to the judge, and I'm pretty confident that the IEE is going to look very different than the district assessment. And the odds are in your favor that the judge is going to say, you know what? You need to fund this IEE, because I'm looking at the IEE and I'm looking at the district assessment, and it looks very, very different. The IEE probably will have uncovered much more areas of in processing deficits, possibly whatever other areas of deficit the child has that the district assessment didn't uncover, just because IEE service providers, they test more comprehensively. They give more subtests. They look at areas of processing much more in depth. There's like 18 areas of processing that a child could have deficits in. And most of the time, district assessments don't look in all those areas of processing. There's also auditory processing areas, vision processing areas, language processing, attention and memory. There's so many areas that go into having a comprehensive psychoeducational assessment that most likely the district assessment did not cover all those areas. Now, another reason to ask for an IEE is that, of course, if your child is very young, you're going to want to make sure that you get a comprehensive IEE for early intervention, because we all know early intervention is the key to helping your child reach their potential, because from the ages of 0 to 7, that's when the neurologically it's actually malleable, and you can connect. I don't know the medical terms, but I just know that at that point you can actually have a physiological healing, or it wouldn't be called healing, but the brain isn't completely, set in its ways until after the age of 7, and you can actually address that before the age of 7. So early intervention, that's why they always say early intervention, get the most intensive services as you can, as early as you can, get diagnosed as early as you can. And the only way to do that is to have appropriate assessments done. Now, another good reason to have an IEE would be to get a second opinion. So if you were going to the doctor and you had a medical problem, and you got one diagnosis from a doctor, most people want to get a second opinion, right? So it's your absolute right to get a second opinion, because you want to make sure that that first opinion is correct and that it didn't miss anything. So you need to be sure that everything was covered, everything was identified. And like I said, most likely that district assessment is not going to identify everything, and it's not going to make the recommendations that you would receive in an IEE. So let me just give you an example. So one of my clients, he's now in high school, and in fact next year he's going to be in 12th grade graduating. So the parents hired me when he was like 7 years old, and I'm still working with him, and he's going to be graduating next year with a high school diploma. And so he's on the autism spectrum. When he was 7 years old, he wasn't talking very much. So I had IEs done for this young boy for the whole time I've been with him, since he was 7 years old. So at every triennial, every 3 years, you have the right to ask for an IEE, because that's how I knew, okay, I've covered everything. I know where his deficits are. I know where his present levels are. And that's how I continue to receive the services that we got for this boy. So he has like a probably $80,000 program, probably upwards of that, because he has an ABA program, and a private ABA program from a private ABA provider, a full-time ABA aide with the BCBA supervising. He has private speech and language services. He has private occupational therapy services, and so, and on and on. So these services are very expensive, but if the districts have the good programs, if the district had a good ABA program within the district, if they had quality speech and language pathologists that could provide the level of services that these kids need, then districts wouldn't have to pay these big numbers for kids. But the problem is they don't have enough speech and language pathologists. So, you could have 5 speech and language goals, and they're going to say, that speech and language pathologist is going to say, well, I'll see them for 30 minutes a week. And then you get an IEE, and the IE says, no, this student needs 2 hours a week, because their speech and language is at such a deficit range, and their pragmatics and social skills, that they need to have a social skills group, and we need to work on the expressive and receptive areas of language as well. So these are some of the differences that you're going to see between an district assessment and an IEE. So that being said, because of the IEE, as I said, the foundation for a solid IEP that's going to meet the needs of the child and provide the level of services that child needs, along with the appropriate goals, holding the teachers and all the service providers accountable to making progress towards those goals. He is now was able to stay on the diploma track. He's been included in a lot of general ed classrooms. He has a couple RSP classrooms that he needs for of course, language arts because of his language deficits, but he's receiving his diploma. Now, most of the time, they're going to want to say, oh no, this student needs to go into a functional class. By the time they hit high school in the 9th grade, when they have that transition from 8th grade to 9th grade going into high school, typically they're going to tell parents, your child needs to go into the functional class. They're never going to be able to keep up with the standardized curriculum, the general ed curriculum, and so that's the best place for them. And most parents don't understand and don't know that they don't have to do that. But now if the gap is too wide because all through grade school they didn't have the services and the goals they needed to keep them up to at least as close to grade level as possible where they could access the curriculum, many times it is not possible to keep them on the diploma. So this is another reason why it's so important to get IEEs as soon as you possibly can. Now, when can you ask for an IEE? So you can ask for an IEE within 2 years of the district doing their assessment. So say the district does their assessment, and you can right there at that IEP meeting, after the findings are discussed, you can say, I disagree with this assessment and I'm requesting an IEE. And this is the IEE service provider I'm requesting. And they write that down in the IEP. You don't have to do it then. You can even wait up to 2 years since that assessment was done, and you can still ask for an IEE within 2 years. After 2 years, the district will most likely, they have the first right to assess, and they'll get to assess again if it's been past 2 years because it's getting close to the triennial, tries every 3 years. But you can ask for an IEE even 2 years after the district assessed. Now, let's talk about the specifics. Okay, I'm going to give you really good tips on how to get a successful IEE done and get it transferred into your IEP. So the first thing you would do is say, I disagree with the district assessment, I'm requesting an IEE, and you need to know what IEE service provider you're going to request. And you're not going to pick off the district list that they provide for you because most of those people are biased to the school district agenda, and you're going to receive the same exact findings that you received in the district assessment. So that's not the way to go. You're going to look into who is the best service provider that provides accurate, complete, and comprehensive IEEs and is not in the district's pocket, is not biased to the school district agenda. And there are many of them. Now, they might be on the district list. They might be. But you have to research the person that you're asking for. Don't just blindly say, oh, I'll choose this one. No, you got research that and make sure they are a qualified person that has been doing this for many years. The IE service providers I work with have been doing, they're veterans in their field. Some of them are world renowned, like the OT I work with, Suzanne Smith-Rowley. She travels the entire world teaching sensory integration. Another neurologist that I work with, Dr. Mitch Perlman, he's been doing this for 35, 40 years. He goes to trials, he goes to fair hearings as a expert witness. So those are the kind of people that you want to look at to get your IE completed. Now, if the district says, I'm sorry, they aren't, we're not contracted with them, they haven't been approved by the school board yet, which I really doubt, because if you're going to get someone who's really renowned in their field, they're probably contracted with your school district. So, but sometimes they'll say they're not. We don't have a contract with them. So the process for that is you just say, that's fine, I'm still requesting. And then they'll say, well, it's going to delay it. And you can say, that's fine, I'm willing to delay it a little bit because I want this person. What they do is they must go to the school board and they present that district, IEE provider's VITA to the school board, and the school board, checks them out, makes sure they're valid and they're credible, and that they do assessments according to state and federal law, and then they will approve it, and then they'll say, okay, we developed a contract, now you can have that person. So make sure that's done. So after you do that and you request that, and if it's not in an IEP, then it must be in writing. Remember, if it's not in writing, it was never happened, or you never said it, because verbally, no timelines get put into place. So the second you do it in writing, or you do it at your IEP, a timeline goes into effect. They must provide you with a PWN within 15 days after you make that request. And that PWN is going to say, we are approving your request for an IEE. If it says we are denying your request for an IEE, it must also say, and we're filing for hearing. And here's the date. And at that point, you're going to say, okay, I want to extend my hearing date because I need to go to get the IEE at my expense. And you're going to go to that hearing and you're going to provide your IEE that you paid for to the judge, and you're going to ask to be reimbursed for the expense that you paid out of your pocket to get the IEE because the district denied it. And then you have an IEP meeting and you translate that information into your IEP. Okay? So then you always ask for 2 hours for your IEP meeting when you go over the assessment findings. When your IEE provider either comes in person to your IEP or they're on the phone, and they're going to review their entire assessment in an IEP meeting with your IEP team. It's so important for your whole IEP team to be there, for them to hear this amazing, important information on your child, because it's going to be like no other assessment that was ever provided. And this information is all the complex, test scores, all the subtests. It's going to be so much more comprehensive than any other assessment that was shown, and it's all the baseline and the foundation to build and progress on your IEP and the development of your child's program. So all your team should be there. You're going to ask for 2 hours, because if your IEE service provider is only there for 1 hour and they do this all the time, an hour takes a whole hour for the IEE service provider just to review their findings, because it is, like I said, comprehensive. There's a lot of information in there. Dr. Davidson, she's a doctor of psychology that does IEEs all the time. Her assessments are like 60 to 75 pages long. So it takes an hour just to review the assessment findings. Then you're stuck because they hang up the phone and you haven't translated the goals, the accommodations, and the services. And you're not a psychologist. You can't possibly do that. It has to come from the psychologist, the specialist. She has to work with the team. She or he has to work with the team in developing the goals, discussing the accommodations that they recommended, and asking the team, is this appropriate to adopt into the IEP? And going over each accommodation one at a time. Some of those IEEs recommendations for accommodations are like 10 accommodations. So you have to go over one by one and decide, this would be appropriate for this school site, this wouldn't be appropriate for high school, that's more for grade school, but we'll rewrite it, we'll revise it to be appropriate for high school. It takes time to do these things, especially development of goals, accommodations, and then you have the discussion about services. So as you know, when you add new goals, then a new level of services are going to have to be discussed, okay? So all that takes time. It could never be done in less than 2 hours. So you make sure that your IE provider has been slated and approved by the district to be there or be on the phone for 2 hours until you've completed that full conversation. If there, for some reason, there are several IEEs that are coming in. Now, I had this situation today in my IEP meeting today. We have 4 IEEs that are coming in, okay? So we could never possibly do that in one IEP meeting. We're gonna have to have 2, maybe 3 IEP meetings to hear 4 IEE evaluations. So, so the district agenda is, first you listen to assessments, then you go on to the goals, then you look at the accommodations, and then you talk about services. So the districts will do this to you if you're not aware. They'll say, we'll listen to the assessments and with the first assessors, and then they'll say, well, I'm sorry, we can't discuss the goals, accommodations, and services because the IEP agenda is we have to first listen to all the assessments, and we still have 3 more assessments to listen to. So I'm sorry, Valerie, but we can't discuss that with the service provider today because we're not to that agenda item yet, the IEP agenda item. That's not okay. You need to make sure that they're going to be flexible with the agenda, IEP agenda, and say, yes, but we can't do it in one meeting. We had to split it up. So therefore, I should be able to talk to the IE service provider and translate or adopt their information into the IEP at this meeting, even though we haven't gotten to accommodations, goals, or services yet. That is huge, and that's a key. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, and you're going to have this amazing assessment with these amazing findings and recommendations, and that's all you're going to have. Because once it gets to the accommodations, goals, and services, they're never going to adopt it into the IEP because that service provider isn't there, and you as a parent are never going to be able to advocate to get it put in there, because it has to come from the provider, from the person who wrote it, to stand up and give the evidence of why they should be adopting those things into the IEP. So that is the biggest thing I hope that you understand, and that you will make sure you don't make that mistake. I've had so many parents come to me for help and say, I got this amazing assessment, and it was we were really happy with it, but nothing happened. No services changed. They didn't put the goals in. They didn't add accommodations. It was just, we had their report, they stuck it in the file, and nothing ever happened. And I said, because did they adopt it into the IEP? Did that service provider make sure they wrote it in there? But, that's not really service providers' jobs. Their job is to do a great, amazing assessment, discuss the findings with the IEP team, and it's not their job to make sure it gets into the IEP. It's the parent's job or the advocate's job. So if you don't have an advocate, you're the advocate, parents. You need to make sure that it's adopted into the IEP. So these things I'm telling you, these tips I'm telling you, are huge. Otherwise, it's like you didn't even get an IEE because nothing changed in your child's program. It was not documented into the IEP, okay? Tape record, always tape record. Now, tape recording is going to provide you with a file, a record of those findings. So you're listening to all this amazing information about your child, all those test scores, which can be very confusing, all the information. And each discipline has their own lingo, their own language, right? Speech and language, occupational therapy language and terms, psychology language and terms, behavior language and terms. They all got their own language. So, the parents don't know all that, Now, a good thing to do, though, before you have your IEP, you can call that IEE service provider and say, I would like to go over this report with you prior to the meeting so I can understand it and I can be prepared at the IEP as you go through it to actually be following it and actually be familiar with that information. If it's the first time you hear it at that IEP, it's all going to go right over your head and you're not even going to understand anything they're saying. So I highly recommend that as soon as you get the draft report, ask your IE provider, I'd like the draft report as soon as it's written. Then you read it over, you study it, you highlight all the things you don't understand, you look up terms and words so that you are a little more familiar before you even talk to them. Then, you can do a lot of pre-work before you talk to them to get a better understanding. And then you'll go over the whole report with them in a conference call, and you're going to be so much more prepared, understand so much more about what they have said about your child, understand the test scores and what they mean. Ask them questions. Don't just listen, ask questions. Make sure that you get your questions answered and you understand to the best of your ability, to the best that you can possibly understand. You're not going to understand all of it, but you can understand the gist of it. You can understand the baselines. You can understand the test scores and the bell curves and how things were scored and where your child is, whether it's severely below average, average. You can understand all those things, and you should understand that because, as I said so many times, this is the foundation to building your child's IEP program. So your tape recording, again, is going to give you, you can go back and listen as a record. And you can go, okay, I remember they talked about that, but I forget this. You can go back and listen because you have it tape recorded. And these assessments are very expensive. So this is, you're not going to, go out of your pocket and say, here, I'm going to get a neurological assessment for $7,000. I mean, you take advantage of it. Be grateful for it. Hold it, in gratitude that, wow, I got this amazing neurological psychoeducational assessment on my child that pretty much says it all, and learn it and understand it. And let's see what else. Build a partnership with your service provider to implement the recommendations. So in your conversation with your service provider, when you talk to them on the phone and you have that conference call, you're going to want to, the most important part of it is the recommendations page, which is at the end of the report. And there's going to be goals, sometimes lots of goals. There's going to be accommodations, sometimes lots of accommodations. And you're going to make sure that you're going to go over that for sure with them. And you're going to ask them, can you please help me at the IEP meeting when I ask my program specialists, can we adopt these goals into the IEP? Can we discuss these goals? Can we go over each one? Can we discuss the accommodations? Okay, Dana's asking a question. Can a parent ask for an IEE by contacting case working the carrier carrying the case? Yes, you can ask for the IEE by contacting them, but you can have that conversation, but you always have to follow it up in writing. So you follow it up in an email. Verbally, she's going to say, oh, sure, we'll work on that, and she might not get back to you for 6 months. Well, as I said, that timeline goes into effect the second you write an email. They've got 15 days to respond to your email request for an IEE. Okay? You're welcome, Dana. So let's see. Partnership with your IEE service provider. They will work with you. They want their assessment adopted into the IEP. I mean, this is their life. This is what they do. They've been doing it their whole life, and they know the importance of their report, and that they know it's not going to help your kid if it's not adopted into the IEP. It's just going to be another report stuck in the CUME file, and nothing ever is going to happen. So they will help you, but they aren't allowed to say, well, district administrator, are you gonna put that in the IEP? They can't say that. That's not their job. It's your job, okay? So partner with your IE provider to make sure it's transcribed into the IEP. All the recommendations. Most important thing, okay? And then, let's see, okay, reevaluation. So many times, if it's certain disciplines, like an occupational therapist or different times, they will recommend they need to be reevaluated within 3 months, within 6 months, within a year. That's important too. Make sure that that's documented into your IEP, that this service provider has highly recommended that my child be reevaluated in whatever amount of time they recommended. That should be documented in your IEP. If it's not, it's never going to happen. So reevaluation is very important because you're going to want to look at, has there been progress after they implemented whatever it was they implemented from that report? Or they're going to look at the data collection. They're going to, there's always going to be a reason for the reevaluation. The reevaluation is going to help you to make sure your child continues to get the services you're looking for and the supports you're looking for. Otherwise, it's just going to go on and it's never going to happen, the reevaluation. So it's a way to hold them accountable, to make sure that progress is being made, and to have services continued. So it's huge to have reevaluation done. And you can also ask for that person to reevaluate, okay? Because if you don't ask for that person to your IEE service provider, they're going to have a district person reevaluate. And that's what you don't want to do. Because what's going to happen if a district person reevaluates? They're going to go right back to their old assessment and they're going to say the exact same thing they did before. They're most likely going to say, well, there wasn't really a whole lot of progress being made, or, oh, this can be provided in the classroom by the teacher, or So you want the IEE service provider to reevaluate to determine if there was progress or look at the data collection or whatever it may be. So let's see, I talked about that, and I told you about that. I want to make sure I got everything in for you guys. So yeah, I think I got everything in. Let's see. Okay, guys, well, I think I reviewed everything on an IEE with you, and I just want to reiterate that, you know, it's the most important piece. It's your diagnosis. It's uncovering all of your child's deficits, and you're never going to receive a comprehensive evaluation by getting it done through the school district. You know, you have a right to get a second opinion, you have a right to disagree with the district's assessment, and you have a right to have an IEE done. Make sure that you find someone who's reputable, who's been doing this for a long time, who is not biased with the school district agenda, and you can do this. I have all of this information on my website. It's going to go out in a newsletter too, so be sure and go to my website, advocatesforangels.com, sign up for my newsletter, and you can also get my free ebook, which is a parent mindset in developing an IEP for your child and becoming a parent advocate for your child. And also, I want to let you know, I am launching my program that I'm going to be teaching all of these things that I've been giving you little snippets of in my live Facebook Lives. I'm going to be launching a program this summer in July. So make sure you look for that on my website. Go to my website, put your email in, and you'll get an email when I launch that program. Because parents, you can become an advocate for your child. You don't have to hire an advocate or attorney. You can learn these things. You can, and that's what I'm going to be teaching you. I'm going to break everything down like I did tonight regarding the IEE. So I hope this helped you, and I will see you guys soon. Good night.